What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the channel, man. I don't even know how I haven't done this freaking video yet, okay? I swear I put it on my calendar, my to-do list, everything, but somehow I pushed it this far along in 2019 and I still have not done a double eye swipe on this thing. So accept my apologies, I'm so sorry. But today we're going to look at the Samsung Galaxy Note 4 and pretty much see how this thing holds up in 2019, whether it's still worth it, whether it's not, all that good stuff. Now we're going to talk a lot about the body itself and kind of compare it to where we're at nowadays in terms of just the phones we have. A lot of new phones came out, the Google Pixel 3a, the OnePlus 7 Pro. This is not going to be a comparison of this directly to the newest phones. Like, I'm not going to tell you those newer phones are better, whatever, because obviously the 2019 iPhones are better, but just kind of seeing the progression and everything. And so without further ado, let's just go ahead and kind of look at it. Now, the Samsung Galaxy Note 4 was released in 2014 in September, so it'll actually turn 5 years old this year, in September this year. And I find it so crazy because when this thing came out, I mean, I tell you guys this story all the time with almost every single phone. Like, just sitting in my classroom and just looking at commercials of this thing and even going on YouTube and looking at reviews, it was so crazy. I mean, I was looking at the Galaxy Note 3 and like that was the perfect phone at the time for me back in like 2013. And then this phone came out and I'm like, what more do you need from a phone? Like, this phone has the basic capabilities of everything and then some. Like, it's a crazy phone. And if you get this phone, I mean, like, how much better can phones get? And obviously we've seen bezel-less phones and all these crazy things, but it's just crazy to see the progression of phones throughout the years. Now, looking on the front, we have a 5.7-inch 1440p Super AMOLED display. Now, remember, this was back in 2014, okay? This has 518 pixels per inch, and overall, what I can tell you is the panel on this thing is freaking awesome. Even nowadays, really, panels have gotten so much better. I mean, my Galaxy S10's panel is very sharp, it's very good, but there's no denying it. Back in 2014, this was mind-boggling. I'm sure there were other 1440p panels at the time, but a lot of phones were still using 720p panels, and they were barely even touching 1080p panels, and the Galaxy Note 3 had a 1080p panel, that was very good, and the fact that this thing had a 1440p panel was freaking amazing. We had a home button on the front and a fingerprint sensor as well, and what I can tell you is just the overall body, it wasn't the most premium thing ever. Like, yes, there were some quirks, there were some weird things here and there, but overall, I think it was a pretty solid device in the hands. It also had a removable back as well, and you can remove the battery, you can remove the storage, add more storage into it. That's most likely what you're going to be doing. Man, this phone was just having so much nostalgia of just using this phone, and just, I never used it when it was released because I never owned it as a main phone, but dude, it was a crazy device. And kind of comparing it to 2019 phones, I know I said I wasn't going to do it, but really, phones have gotten so much better now. They feel much more premium, but this phone, there's no denying it, had a very sharp screen, removable back, removable storage. This phone has so many more features that even current phones do not have, so that's one thing to keep in mind. Now, that kind of covers up the outside. Now, this thing also had the S Pen. I'll talk into that in a second, but this was a pretty big package for a phone back in 2014. Now, talking about the software, this thing was released with Android 4.4.4 KitKat. It was upgradable to Android 6.0.1 Android Marshmallow, so that was a pretty big upgrade in my opinion, and that's when it cut off. It didn't get any more software support after that. But here's an interesting thing to keep in mind. This thing is rootable, and you are able to throw a custom ROM on it as well. And for a lot of people, you might be like, who's going to do it, this and that, but there's still a pretty big development community out there. For a 5-year-old phone, it's pretty big. There's Android Nougat ROMs, there's Android Oreo ROMs. I have seen some Android Pie ROMs, I believe, as well. So those are some pretty big deals in my opinion. I mean, most likely you don't want to get a phone that's just end of life. You don't want to get one that's just not being supported anymore. You want to get a phone that's still going to have a lot of life left in it. And granted, the Galaxy Note 4's third-party development community isn't as big as it used to be, but there's still some key developers in that frame. And I'll definitely tell you, in terms of software, it might be unsupported. It might not be, the go-to device for people to go and throw custom ROMs at and develop it for it, but it's still a very good device in terms of software. Now, on stock, it has TouchWiz, which I really would not recommend you guys to use. It's outdated, it has huge security risks. And in terms of that, I would probably tell you to kind of upgrade into something else. And that's why I would kind of recommend a custom ROM. People do get scared of it for some reason. They're like, oh, I don't want to throw something on there. What if it has a virus, this or that? You're better off throwing custom ROM on it, having that security, rather than not having that security and just kind of going on with it, in my opinion. So in terms of software, I'll definitely tell you, in terms of stock software, you're pretty much outdated pretty badly. But in third-party development community, you do have quite a bit of life left in this device. So in terms of that, that's pretty much where we're going to leave the software aspect of it. Now, moving on to the performance aspect, and this is the one part where you guys probably love the most. I'll tell you the specs and I'll tell you the performance right after. So this thing had the Qualcomm Snapdragon 805 chipset on some variants and an Exynos 5433 on others. Now, most likely you're going to have the Qualcomm Snapdragon 805 if you're in America. It had a quad-core CPU, clocked at 2.7 gigahertz. an Adreno 420 GPU, and 3 gigs of RAM. Now what's cool about this is that we still have a lot of devices that only have like 4 gigs of RAM. For example, the Pixel 3a, which is only 1 gigabyte more than the Galaxy Note 4, which is kind of interesting. Of course, the Galaxy Note 4 is going to be overall slower than the Pixel 3a, but I'll definitely tell you, when I'm using my Galaxy Note 4, when I used it, and I've owned like 2 of them, I think, or maybe 3, it's not a slow device in the sense that scrolling through apps, opening apps, all those things, like you should expect to see some lag, you should expect to see some slowdown in performance. Like I wouldn't expect this thing to have like the best performance ever or anything like that, because if it did, then people would still be selling it, Samsung would still be selling it. So I'm not looking at this device and saying, oh my god, this thing is so slow, it's unusable. I'm looking at this device and I'm like, for a 5-year-old phone, it is a very decent performer. You know, I calculate the age and I calculate everything within it, and you have to factor that in when you're comparing something like this in 2019. So I'll definitely tell you, for the age being, it's not that bad of a device, but of course in today's standards it's pretty slow. Opening apps is kind of slow, because even though the stock software, if you keep it on stock, it's on Android Marshmallow, you would think it's optimized and all that stuff, which it is. The apps are still getting updated on the App Store, so these apps are now only like suitable for Android Pie devices and eventually Android Q devices, and at some point Android Marshmallow will be unsupported with apps. There's only going to be a handful of apps that are going to be supported for Android Marshmallow, so you kind of have to keep that in mind. I mean, are you going to stick with stock, or are you going to go custom ROM? Because on those custom ROMs, depending on which version you're at, whether Android N or your Android Pie, you're going to be set up, man. What I'll tell you is, if you're going on basic apps like internet browser and doing things like that, you're not going to have a problem. But when you go up to like heavy intensive gaming and things like that, that's when things do kind of take a toll, and you do kind of have to figure out your usage from there and kind of go from there. And I mean, what I'll tell you is, in overall performance, it's not a bad device when you consider the age, but if you're trying to get this device to still get like a huge heavy using device that's going to be able to do anything you want at it, this is probably not the device for you, but you probably already know that. I'm sure there's still a ton of you who use the Galaxy Note 4 and are probably just like agreeing with me or disagreeing with me. If you have any of those feelings, let me know in the comment section below. But I think in terms of the performance aspect of it, it's not a bad device at all. I think it's decent, but I wouldn't recommend this to somebody who's looking for performance, and I think you guys kind of already expected that in my opinion. So that kind of covers up the performance aspect of it. Let's go ahead and talk about the camera sensor. Now, in my opinion, this might surprise you. I think Samsung does make one of the best camera sensors out there. I personally think they are better than iPhones. I've used the Pixel 3's camera. It's hard to tell which one is better. People say the Pixel 3, but maybe I'm different. But back in 2014, the Galaxy Note 4 had an incredible camera. It's a 16 megapixel sensor, and it has optical image stabilization, autofocus obviously, and I'll tell you like this, man. This camera in 2019, it's still not a bad camera in my opinion. Like, I'm not a photographer, I'm not like that much into cameras to begin with, but I think overall, if you're kind of just looking at it and just taking photos, I think the colors pop. I think that has a lot to do with the screen, but the colors are pretty accurate. There's a lot of different things going on with the sensor that I can't explain that just kind of bleed out to me that it's a very decent camera even in 2019. It's not the best. Obviously, the newest cameras, the Galaxy S10s, is way better. There's still quite a bit of features on the Galaxy Note 4's camera though, which is pretty interesting. The front camera is 3.7 megapixels, not the best. I mean, you can shoot 1440p videos on it, which is pretty interesting. There was a slight problem with some front cameras though, and I've seen this before. It's like the front camera behind the panel, it'll get like dirt and stuff behind it, which is kind of weird. So make sure, you're probably getting a used Galaxy Note 4. Make sure there's no dust or anything in that front camera. But in terms of the quality and everything, I still think it holds up in 2019. I don't think it's a bad camera at all. So with that, I give it a seal of approval in that sense. Now, this last thing I want to hit on is the battery life. Now, you might be surprised at me saying this. I'm going to break this down into 2 categories, okay? If you're getting a Galaxy Note 4, like I said, most likely it's used. It was battered up. People used it a lot. If it's still on that stock battery, it's a 3220 milliamp hour battery, and most likely that battery has degraded quite a bit in the 5 years. So if it's the same battery inside of it, it's probably not that big. It's probably like 2500. The size is the same, but the battery degraded over time, so it's like 2200, 25, whatever it is. So in terms of that, it's probably not that good. But here's the thing. This battery is removable. You can go buy a third-party battery on Amazon or whatever the case is and just throw it in there and be set. And that is one thing I would really, really recommend you to do. If you're even planning on getting a phone like this, whether it's the Note 3 or a Galaxy S5 or whatever the case is, getting a new battery installed on there is awesome. So you can go and buy a 3220 milliamp hour battery, or what you could do is go buy a 4000 or 5000 or whatever big, I think they make like 10,000 milliamp hour batteries, throw it in this device and just use it like a normal thing. And it's a little bit thicker here and there, but you get such better battery life that it's so awesome. And that is one huge advantage of the Galaxy Note 4. So that kind of covers up everything I wanted to hit on. Like I said before, some key points: this thing has a beautiful screen in my opinion. The S Pen is awesome. I love it a lot. The features that it brings is just like one additional thing of like to pick up this phone. That one thing that separates this phone versus a lot of other phones. It's built into the phone. You don't have to worry about anything. If you drop it or lose it, you'll have to get another one. But I think the S Pen is an awesome feature and I like it a lot. Removable battery, like I said. And to kind of answer the question, is this phone still worth it in 2019? What I would probably tell you is I think this phone is probably more worth it than the Galaxy Note 5 in my opinion. I think the Note 5 had its time, but it's definitely kind of quirky here and there. I'll tell you that if you currently own a Galaxy Note 4, you could probably just keep custom ROMing it or just throwing ROMs at it. As long as it's still alive, then you're good. But if you're looking for a Galaxy Note 4, I mean, if you can find one for a good deal, I say go for it. I mean, there's really nothing that tells me that it's a horrible device or anything. I mean, like I said, the burn-in is kind of a problem if you plan on picking up a Galaxy Note 4 because it is an OLED display, but I think ultimately it's not a bad phone at all. Of course, there's better options out there. I would recommend even like a Galaxy Note 8, which is probably like $100 or $200 more than this. The original Google Pixel is a very good device as well, and that's only like $50 more than this one, I believe, too. So I'll go ahead and link a Galaxy Note 4 as well as a Google Pixel or Google Pixel XL in the description, and man, I'd probably recommend the Pixel XL more than this thing, but that's kind of up to you. I love the Note 4. I think it's kind of cool in its own ways. And even in 2019, if you're still rocking with it, let me know in the comment section below how it runs for you, whether you like it or you don't like it. Let me know in the comment section below. But that is pretty much it. If you guys have any other questions or anything like that, leave it down in the comment section as well. Hit that like button. That would mean so much. But definitely hit that subscribe button. Every single subscriber that we get really does count. So it means so much if you guys could hit that. Also, check out the other links down in the description as well. My Twitter, my Instagram, my second channel. All those links are linked down below. I would really appreciate if you guys could check it out. But more importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.